For all of our anthropocentrism, it had never occurred to us that we would be the first. In fiction, whenever humanity finally lifted itself up into the heavens, flinging their muling vessels into space between the stars, there would always be another, an elder, a species that was our better, even if they no longer existed. Yet, when we took to the stars, we found no trace of anything like that. There was a restrained sense of optimism in the pioneering early years, when the Schneider drive went into mass production and manned exploration began in earnest. Our telescopes had spotted a good number of what had seemed like perfect worlds, Earth-sized and right in the Goldilocks zone of their respective stars. Some were indeed host to life, but only in the most primordial and basic of forms. In the span of 2 decades, much of the Orion span had been mapped out, and yet we could still find nothing that was truly Earth-like. We'd always supposed that worlds like Earth must exist, that life like us should come into being. It was a mathematical certainty, guaranteed by the law of averages. Yet there were none we could find. Not even when we ventured out into the Orion Arm proper. Space was empty. Dead. The surface of all worlds, save Earth, were just as barren and hostile to humanity as the very void that separated them. Xenobiology and astrobiology, fields which had experienced extraordinary booms during the earliest days of space exploration and colonization, now fell by the wayside. The procedures that had been written up by the various corporations and government bodies for extraterrestrial contact were no longer trained, relegated to the backs of the oldest training manuals. We were alone, it seemed. It was funny how we thought otherwise while restricted to the Earth, but now when in space, judged ourselves unique. Earth was a fluke, a mistake of chance. We did our best to seed the galaxy with life, terraformation where possible, and sealed self-sustaining habitats where most profitable. It rarely worked out perfectly, though, with even those projects judged to have had the most potential running into unexpected troubles. Mars had been only a partial success, efforts continuing even now, many centuries later, to keep it habitable. Other worlds were much the same, and we began to realize the difficulty in providing for life, creating a world suitable for it. If we would find it so hard, how could the universe be relied upon to allow for it by random chance alone? At the height of our efforts, nearly 1,000 planets all across the galaxy had been seeded in one form or another. Algae, various fungi, and countless other microorganisms had been introduced to those planets, which were most likely to sustain them. It had become standard procedure for the exploration ships upon finding such a world. They dropped several dozen such capsules across the surface, each one a miniature habitat that'd provide water, heat, and nutrients temporarily to the organisms stored within. Some took, but many didn't. We concerned ourselves with other issues in the interim. Earth's massive population had become increasingly problematic, and the interest of governments had never been especially strong in the rest of the galaxy. The first wars fought in space occurred during this period, but even then they were relatively tame affairs, resembling the submarine duels of the seafaring days. They ended just as quickly as they'd begun. With the surfaces of Mars, Titan, Ganymede, and countless other moons and worlds in the solar system and local cluster suddenly finding themselves host to the sprawling masses of humanity. Another look was taken outward, and the results of those earliest efforts shocked us. It had now been several centuries since that first terraformation craze. Worlds that had once been brown, dark, and ugly were now green and verdant. They weren't forests, but the lichen had taken, and in places given way to other, sometimes more complex organisms. There were hundreds of thousands of new species wrought from those initial efforts. Millions of tiny micro-adjustments made by the various life forms we'd seeded across countless star systems. It was unsurprising that the optimism of the early days returned, and so too did the promise of astrobiology. A concerted effort was undertaken, as scientific curiosity and pragmatism combined to continue all the projects. The most survivable of creatures, both genetically engineered and not, were dropped onto the surfaces of many of these most successful planets. Insects, sponges, jellies, and countless others. We still didn't expect to encounter any sentient alien life, and very rarely encountered any life at all in the cosmos that we hadn't put there. But something occurred to us. We were that elder race. We were the ones that would plant the seeds, who would pave the way for other life. We wept as we watched those animals we'd planted change, evolve, and diverge from their Terran origins in completely different ways. The course of evolution took many generations in most places, but bioengineering, high radiation levels, and other factors contributed to accelerate the process in others. We'd found the galaxy gray and brown, but we would leave it blue and green. Hundreds of worlds were made off-limits to settlements or colonization, despite their viability, for the purpose of fostering the species that had taken to them. More complex life was introduced very gradually, and only when circumstances allowed for it. Hundreds of millions watched the video of the release of the first birds on the surface of CGY 1209. We'd created a galactic nature preserve. Bit by bit, we corrected with human ingenuity the greatest cosmic tragedy, Earth's novelty. Thanks for tuning in to another tale as told by Cloak and Dagger Narrations. If you enjoyed the story, please feel free to show it with a like or a comment, and throw a subscription my way to hear more. Or, if you'd like to help support the channel and keep these stories going, you can consider flinging money wildly in the direction of my Patreon. Or, check the paypal.me link for a one-time money-flinging opportunity. If you want something in return for your money flinging, apart from the sultry sounds of my voice, there's a Teespring link down in the description. Wear the logo and send more people here to join you in money flinging. Or, you can check the Drive-Thru RPG affiliate link to pick up some rulebooks and start making stories of your own. Thank you.